Hello and welcome back to another live episode of Red Tinted Glasses, or catching up if you're tuning in on audio, of course, because we like to remember everybody, even though normally my intros are tailored to the live audience here on YouTube. Coming up on the show today, we look back at the final game of the season as the Dons drew 2-2 with Ross County. We'll be looking at the key positions we think Jimmy Thelin and the recruitment should be looking at over the course of the summer. We were hoping to be speaking about the Scotland squad and maybe Connor Barron's inclusion, but alas, not to be. And then we'll come on to any other topics that are covered by those joining us live here on the show in the comments, and maybe contributing factors to giving us some content, as you guys always do in the comments. Delighted, as always, to be joined by Phil Mayer as Callum continues his hiatus from the show, or as he calls it, working in Tesco for his Germany fund. So, Phil, how are you doing?
Yeah, no, not too bad. No complaints. It's pretty miserable here in Edinburgh. I assume it's the same up the road, but yeah,
It,
pretty
it
good.
is. It is very miserable, but I guess maybe summing up the feeling now that the season's come to a close. I don't know, Phil, how you feel now that the season's ended. It was a strange season, a roller coaster season, but we end the season unbeaten in the bottom six, and we end the season with a sense of unity, a sense of pride back in the club, a sense of connection, I think is maybe a better word. I know a few folk maybe think we were over celebrating after the game of the weekend, but I don't really think they were celebrating as such. It was more appreciating the job that Peter Leven more specifically had done, and also the players. My favorite thing to do right now is make professional comments on people's LinkedIn, such as Peter Leven's as well.
Yeah, it's like I say, been a funny old season. I think we've gone through the ringer a bit with every emotion. I think the term we bandied about most on the podcast this season's been apathetic. I
Mm.
think that was probably the feeling for the most part. If you'd asked me, 4 months ago whether I'd be sort of having the optimism going into the next season, wouldn't have thought it. But yeah, no, like I say, I think it's just been a massive turnaround since Leavens came back in the second stint as interim. Like you say, just the connection that everyone feels with the club again, with the players on the pitch, and like I say, just the optimism going into next season's. Yeah, really, it's a weird one. Couldn't wait for the season to be over, but now I'm kind of gutted that it is.
Yeah, I think that's quite a good assessment. I think if you'd said maybe back in February, are you looking forward to the end of the season? Most of us would have been counting down the days, but now that it's here, it's like, oh, what do we do with ourselves? Obviously, me and you are off to Germany in a few weeks to sample the Euros, but of course, we're only what 9, 10 days away from Jimmy Thelin taking charge, and then of course we'll begin transfer rumors in full effect and what that brings as well. But of course, the season might be coming to a close, but that doesn't mean the content doesn't stop here on Red Tinted Glasses. Of course, next Wednesday, and this episode going out live on YouTube on the 22nd. On the 29th, it is the League Cup draw, so we will have an episode probably in a couple of days after that, reacting to the draw and around Jimmy's kind of first few days, because unfortunately we're now contractually obliged to release one episode a month. So probably release that around June just to keep the audio contract happy as well. But we'll focus on the pitch matters. A 2-2 draw. I don't really want to kind of spend too much time looking back at the weekend, because it's not going to really affect anything other than financially, because of course the result meant the Dons secured that seventh place finish, probably the bare minimum once we went into the bottom six split. Rung the changes again. Kyle Roos coming back into goal. Esther Sokler. We weren't overly impressed by him in what we saw against Livingston, but I thought he looked a lot better on Sunday, probably helped by the better quality of service provided to him.
Yeah, I think as well. I think he really came into his own as more of a target striker. I thought some of his hold up play and his ability to sort of to link the wide players, Hoylett and McGrath, able to sort of link them into the game. I thought was really good. So no, definitely, I would say a bit more of a improvement compared to the Livy game from Esther.
And obviously bagging a goal as well after terrific work from Connor Barron, a player who obviously we don't know whether or not will remain at the club this time next season. And a really impressive finish from Esther Sokler, because it was actually, he seemed to get a lot of hang time on the header as well. It wasn't like he met it. You know, the more you watch the replays, he was up there for a long time.
Yeah, I mean it was almost Ronaldo-esque. Sort of when I was watching back the goal earlier on today, I sort of came to the same conclusion. I was like, God, he seems to just sort of leap so early to the point where you think he's getting nowhere near it. But no, like I say, it was a good header from him. And again, I think he's sort of coming into his own as a bit more of a sort of target and penalty box striker a little bit. Obviously, his goal at Hampden as well was very similar.
Well, a penalty box striker, but he also had a very important hand in the second goal as well, kind of playing in that out wide role, picking up the ball and driving it kind of in towards the box well before kind of passing off to Junior Hoylett, who set up Jamie McGrath to make it 2-1, 2-0. That's how much I was paying. Yeah, 2-1 at that point, because I was running a bit late getting home from Barra on Sunday, so missed the Simon Murray opener. But just showing kind of that quality that he brings outside the box as well. And he's not just going to be kind of a finisher. He can provide assists as well. But Phil, as well, you know, George Rutherford saying 3-1 offside, never shown on both TV or YouTube. I know you'll maybe have seen a couple of the still images of the VAR decision, which again just makes more of a meal of what we've seen this season from that system. But once again, proving that he's there and thereabouts, off the shoulder of the last defender and ready to cause problems when needed.
Yeah, no, like the comment says. I mean, I was a bit confused why it wasn't showing on the official SPFL highlights. And I feel like I can't say I watch them that often, but I feel like usually if there's an offside for VAR or whatnot, they'll typically show it with the lines and whatnot. And like you say, the still images didn't do it any justice to the SFA getting it right. But no, I think seeing him sort of gain that little bit of confidence, and whether he does have a big role next season as our starting nine, I don't know, or whether he will be sort of used more frequently off the bench, as he has been.
Oh, your sound's gone, Phil. It's back now.
Killed themselves there.
Yeah, I see, and we hear you now. It dropped off a little bit there.
Oh, perfect.
When you were speaking there, when you were speaking there, I just wondered as well about whether or not we'll see. You mentioned whether or not we'll see Esther Sokler there as the number 9, or maybe kind of what we've seen this season as a striker off the bench. Do you think he's probably a striker that suits being part of a front two rather than on his own?
I think so. I think I think either as two up front or even in a front three, I think he could be pretty effective. Like I say, I think his ability to link his sort of other creative players going forward is quite useful. So I think, either as a 2 or in a 3. I think as a lone striker, especially in games where you do maybe see a bit less of the ball, where it's a bit tighter, your Celtic Rangers games, even against Hearts and Hibs at times, you can come under the cosh a bit. Like he can get a little bit isolated up there on his own. So no, I think he's definitely probably going to have someone next to him.
Yeah, I think he probably does benefit more. I know he's looked good on his own, but also at times this season he's also looked extremely isolated. But I remember thinking the same of Bojan Meowski before Barry Robson came in, and because I didn't feel Bojan maybe kind of chased down lost causes, and he developed that side of his game into a much better player. A few comments around the VAR before we move on to the next topic. Graham Gibbs saying, can we sort it out before next season? The penalty given to Livingston in the offside for Sokler seemed harsh. Can we go for clear and obvious? Again, this seems to be, I remember saying that at the Livingston game, it's supposed to be clear and obvious. Was the decision the referee made clear and obviously wrong? For me, it didn't feel that way. It also kind of needs ownership from the referees around that as well. No Blaha makes a really good point, and one that I just struggle to kind of get my head around why Scottish football doesn't do this, other than the fact that we've taken the cheapest option. Each SPFL ground should be required to install a track that runs the line perpendicular to play and holds a camera that goes back and forth like a racetrack rabbit, or I guess like what we see in the 100-meter sprint, the likes of the Olympics, of course, very topical for this summer. It goes on to say the angles they are drawing the offside lines for are incredibly laughable. Absolutely, some of them seem squint, they don't seem right, and also the angles that we're looking at, it's almost like they're drawing the lines backwards because the camera angle isn't up with play. Compared to what we see down south, it is tin pot, let's be honest. It really doesn't kind of hold up. And I think Graham making a good point, of course, in relation to that Sokler goal that was ruled out, game-changing in the sense of Ross County would have been down and out and consigned to 11th at that point at 3-1, and I totally agree with that, Graham. Obviously, we go and hand them a lifeline with Angus MacDonald conceding the penalty and subsequently getting sent off. I do wonder with that red card if he will now serve that suspension, of course, if he's still here next season as well, during the League Cup group stage campaign, because I know those two competitions and the suspensions kind of intertwine. Of course, had Ross County, when they did get back into the game at 2-2, gone on to win the game, I'm sure St Johnstone and their fans alike would have been severely questioning that decision. But I guess we'll never know because that never materialised as well. So, it could have had huge knock-on effects for both clubs, not just ourselves as well.
Yeah, and I think as well, especially looking at the St Johnstone Motherwell game, I think Blair Spittle cracked one off the post as well, which would have brought Motherwell back into it. And if County had managed to get that third goal, it really would have been a bit of a smash and grab to keep them up. But yeah, just on the topic of the penalty as well, I think as good as Angus has been since he's came in, I think that's the one flaw he does have occasionally is his pace. He is getting older. He's never, claimed to be a quick centre half. I think obviously having Pollock next to him in the first run, they kind of worked off each other quite well in that sense. And I think it's sort of the same way that Rubezic and McDonald can work quite well. But yeah, I don't think we can really have any complaints about that one. But yeah, we'll see if he's still here and serving in the League Cup.
Yeah, there's not really kind of too much from an Aberdeen point of view to, in my opinion, really discuss. I wanted to kind of obviously look into the Esther Sokler performance because I was encouraged by that. I guess the other talking point, of course, because he was serenaded for the majority of the game, is Junior Hoylett. And obviously the fans behind the goal asking for one more year. Peter Leven's been asking Dave Cormack and the board to do all they can, but ultimately the decision will fall to Jimmy when he comes in June. We've got to be doing everything we can, don't we? But the way he's performed, I think he ended up finishing the season as a whole in the Scottish Premiership as the player with the second best chance created conversion. I think one of my colleagues was telling me, which just shows the impact he's had since coming in. But those performances, as eye-catching as they've been for Aberdeen, they're going to be catching clubs down south who can probably arguably make more financial offer to him than we can.
Yeah, I think a player of his quality and the sort of creative spark he's given us, there's bound to be teams that are looking at and are screaming out for it. Any of your sort of playoff chasing teams in the Championship, your top end League One teams, a Wrexham that can throw money galore, would be crying out for a big name like that as well. I think as well, obviously the family ties maybe play a part, not just the financials. Yeah. Obviously, I've spoken before about his son being at the Reading Academy, which I believe Reading just put half their assets up for sale. So who knows? His son might end up at us at this point. Yeah. But yeah, no, I think at the end of the day, the ball is really just in the court of Jimmy and Junior. If Jimmy wants to keep him, he'll make an offer, and then it's really up to Hoylett on whether that family sacrifice or financial sacrifice potentially is worth it.
And I don't think the Canadian squad's been announced yet for Copa America by Jesse March.
Not
So,
that I've seen.
with Connor Barron not making the Scotland squad, it'll be interesting to see if Junior Hoylett makes the Aberdeen squad, the Canada squad, even, because I know certainly with the Euros, there's a cash reward for clubs who put their players out. I remember, obviously, coming out during the World Cup that Hearts were getting an influx of cash for every day their Australian players were at the World Cup. So if Junior was to be selected for Copa America and go to the event, I would think Aberdeen would be entitled to money if it works the same for that competition as it does for World Cup, and potentially if it worked for the Euros as well. So the season draws to a close. We finished seventh. As I said, at the end of the game, Phil, obviously there's a lot's been made. The video that's come out from the club about the fans serenading not only Junior, Johnny, Peter, Bojan, all those players come full time. But I think we have to emphasise, we as fans, certainly those that were there, are not celebrating that seventh place finish. We're not celebrating the season that's been, where we're, kind of, as I said at the top of the show, celebrating the job that they've done in turning around the fortunes. And it's just so enjoyable to have that connection back with the football club, because unfortunately both Barry Robson and Neil Warnock, through one way or another, burnt those connections. And you mentioned the word apathetic. I think Sam Gordon's mentioned frustrating in the comments as well. A key word that's been used plenty times this season. I'll be glad to not use that on here for a few weeks. It's just nice to feel that connection, and that's really what was being celebrated at the end. And hopefully that momentum that we've ended the season can be carried into the League Cup group stages, and then more importantly, the season itself when it gets going.
Yeah, I mean, seventh is, people can say it's overzealous, maybe, but a team like Aberdeen shouldn't be finishing seventh. Unfortunately, that's just the long and short. No one's going to view seventh as success. Any manager that comes in, I think, openly says that that's not a successful place for Aberdeen to be. And if a manager ends up in that position, they are going to come under a bit of scrutiny. Like you say, I think it's just, a bit of pride's been restored. Players look like they're actually caring. The management team's obviously really impassioned and cares about the club, cares about the fans, cares about getting results. And it's just bringing that connection back. I mean, you can see it recently. I mean, there's been, a lot put out by the club regarding DNA and season tickets. And from what I can tell, from the reaction to that on Twitter and just from sort of speaking to various people at games and stuff, that all seems to be going down well. There's a few people I know that have taken up DNA for the first time. There's a few people I know that, weren't renewing their season tickets, but are now, turned around and they're renewing them. So no, I just think there's this great sort of sense of, like you say, optimism, belief, and the pride and connection back with the clubs where it was at the start of the season.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's so important, especially going into the off season, and trying to generate the season ticket sales and get that interest back for next season. Maybe that interest for some that waned during that November, December, January period when things were really going wrong. One final point before we move on, because it's an interesting point that No Blaha makes around kind of the homegrown players, because also we've seen Fletcher Boyd come into the team at the end of the season. Jack McKenzie's had a hugely successful season, of course, being named Young Player of the Year as well. He says, if Nicky Devlin was a Northeast loon, he'd be roasted after each performance. See Jack McKenzie, Dean Campbell during his time. Like him, but he does some silly things at times as well. Obviously, a few of you in the comments just now talk about Nicky Devlin and his claims around being fouled for the opening goal by Simon Murray. I think it's quite a fair point, because the local lads do probably get a harder time than those not from here. I think I was a bit surprised not to see Jack Milne get a run out in the penultimate two games of the season, and Nicky Devlin favoured instead. But yeah, for one reason or another, despite them players of a local variety, living out our dreams, they get a lot more criticism or are easily targeted in comparison to those not from Aberdeen in the northeast.
Yeah, I don't know if it's maybe that sort of Aberdonian pessimistic, I can't say the word, sort of mindset where it's, you're from Aberdeen, you're instantly sort of meh already. You're not from the dazzling exotic favelas of the Central Belt. So it's
The
yeah, and I mean, like I
favelas of
say,
Falkirk.
exactly. You're not like the Bellshill Cafe, Stephen O'Donnell, but no, I think it's a bit like that, and I think you're always a bit more impassioned about players that have came through your system. I think it's oftentimes, I want to say it's probably not from a place of malice. I think it is genuinely from a place of just wanting to see them really succeed. And you do sort of hold them to that higher sort of standard.
As Dave Murray says there in the comments.
Yeah, exactly. Just
No, your sound's gone again.
Oh,
You're back now.
I'm gonna blame Steve Jobs. At
the end of the day, I think you're right. We do tend to hold our own to a higher standard, as Dave's also said. But something to certainly keep an eye on next season, because of course Jimmy is quite a keen person in terms of bringing through young players and hopefully, given what we've seen from the success of the youth academy this season, we see more of them across the next season and maybe future as well. But Musical Box, to round off, of course, the Premiership season, he says, compared to where we might have finished, 7th isn't that bad for this season. And I think 7th, given where we were and when we were destined for the bottom 6, is the bare minimum where we should have been finishing. I think kind of wanted to go back to a point you made as well about when you spoke about the kind of ambition side of things. 3rd shouldn't be seen as a successful season. It should be seen as the bare minimum of where this team should be finishing. Similarly, getting to cup finals as well. It's that just because we finished 3rd does not mean it's a successful season. That's what we as a club expect. But to be successful, I'd want us to be looking, as we've always said most seasons, is challenging the top 2 as best or for as long as we can, not just doing a Hearts and just sitting holding your own in 3rd with not even laying a glove on Celtic or Rangers in terms of the league. But we're not exactly ones to talk this season.
No, and I think as well we should, going forward, I think a lot of the teams can fall victim to it is having one season in Europe and then having a season where you just absolutely tank it. I think really going forward, consistent European football is the only way you're going to be able to build the sort of funds and build the experience to really challenge the top 2. So, I'm with you that 3rd and consistent qualification into the group stage is proper for Europe. So a must for the club in the next few years.
Well, of course, that's going to get more difficult from next season, of course, with the change to the coefficient. But European football, of course, is key not only to the club's finances, as you say, but key to attracting players. So I think we should look at what we can expect the club to be looking at in the summer. So with the summer transfer window opening in June and Jimmy Thelin coming in June as well, what key positions should he be looking at? Before I get your opinion on this, Phil, we will, of course, remember that we have 2 new signings coming in the summer, or they'll be treated like new signings. Vicente Bizaoun continues his fine run of form at FC Emmen, and Pape Habib Gueye looks a player reborn. I think he won the penalty and scored against Brann at the weekend, I saw. And he also scored against Bodo Glimt. I think it was a brace against that. And Vinny Bizaoun seemed to be going from strength to strength. That's 2 goals in 2 games. I think 9 goals in total he's had it on that loan spell.
I think it's 7 and 7 now, almost, or 6 and 7.
It's seriously impressive, whatever those stats are. And I'm sure, regardless if his future lies at Pittodrie or not, if he's given any sort of chance during pre-season, it will be seen as a new signing, his arrival back to Cormac Park.
Yeah, no, I think it's especially we are going for 4-3-3 as has sort of been bandied about as Jimmy's preferred formation maybe. I think Bowen's got, like I think I said last week, I think Bowen's got to have a sniff. He's adding that end product by the looks of things to his game, which a lot of people were quite rightly critical of. From a lot of his time in Aberdeen, he did everything right up until producing a goal or an assist. So if he's been able to add that to his game and get a bit more confident, I think he could be a great asset.
I think as well, that's a good point. But one thing people were critical of Dante Polvara before he went to Charleston Battery was his physique. And I think a lot of people have picked up on Vinny Bazan maybe being too slight. So if, again, he's worked on his physical attributes like I feel Dante has, then that's another dimension that we can only benefit from if, of course, as we said, he's given that chance next season.
Yeah, I mean, Callum was a big proponent of the little muscle boy or whatever he was calling him for a while. So if he has got that sort of, which from what I've seen from some of the photos and stuff online, it looks like he has definitely added some muscle to his frame. Yeah, we could have a good player on our hands. Same with Pap as well. He clearly was a decent goal scorer in the Scandinavian leagues. He's shown it again. Maybe it's a comfort thing. Like you say, he's struggled to settle in here, and maybe that's sort of seeping its way into his confidence in game. So, yeah, if he can come back, again, maybe fill that Sockler role of, being a bit of a menace off the bench, causing defence trouble. And again, he's another one. I don't think his build's ever really going to change in the same way as Polvara and Vinny's maybe has. But if he's maybe able to, put a little bit more, even just a little bit more weight on, to sort of throw himself about a bit. Again, he could be a bit of a different option coming off the bench as more of a physical presence.
Yeah. Kaiser and John Kelo both asking, what about Jaden Richardson? Of course, his loan at his various clubs down south has ended and he'll be back. Of course, you've also got Alfie Stewart and Alfie Babbage, both, I'm sure, keen to maybe look to push on for first team places as well on their return from loan spells at their respective clubs last season. But if we look in terms of permanent signings, what would you say is the kind of priority positions that we should be looking at to get shored up straight away?
I think goalkeeper is the main one. Roos doesn't look like he's going to be here. You would think a contract would have been probably agreed by now if he was going to. It seems a bit late in the day to still be in limbo about that. And as much as we've not really been able to see a lot of him, I don't think Ross Duhan's the number one goalkeeper. Whether we look, internally, I know there's been a lot of word about Mitov from St Johnstone. Obviously, they're staying up now, so maybe that that bargain goes away a little bit. Whether he had a relegation clause similar to what Mikey Devlin's got at Livy. Or whether we do look at bringing in maybe a keeper Jimmy's worked with in his time in Sweden. I think that's probably one of the main ones. I think we need to really go a bit more modern as well. Someone
that can play from the back, maybe.
Bit more than.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it'll be interesting to see if Jimmy kind of goes towards that Scandinavian market, or goes domestic. I'm sure he'll have been doing a bit of scouting. Dave Murray suggesting Mitov or the Staggies goalkeeper. I hope you're not referencing Ross Laidlaw, Dave, and it was the one that they had before Ross got his place back in, because I'm really not a big kind of rater of Ross Laidlaw. I don't think he's all too great. I think though for another position, Phil, that should be kind of quite keen to tie up, we've got to be looking at our defence because, of course, Richard Jensen's kind of found himself out of favour in recent weeks. Ruby's coming back to fitness, but Angus MacDonald's future's up in the air, and of course Stefan Gartman, his loan spell comes to the end, so whether or not he comes back for next summer. But if you're going to be signing a new goalkeeper, you want to have a stable and shored up defence in front of him. So for me, I've still got doubts around that centre of defence for us.
Yeah, no.
Oh, your audio's gone again. You're dropping off more like Barry Robson's back four just now. So I'll move on whilst you fix your AirPods and say the other position outside the defence for me would be a striker. Obviously, Bojan Meowski. We expect to be leaving the club, and Duke's future remains up in the air. But again, also we expect Duke to probably depart the club.
Yeah, sorry, my earphones are playing up, so I've just missed half of that.
I was just saying that the strikers I'd be looking for would be another position outside the defence.
Yeah, no, like I said, I think defence, going back to that point, I think you're probably wanting maybe a bit more progressive ball playing centre halves, if we are looking for that purposeful diagonal out wide and whatnot. And like I say, I think, maybe a bit more pace in there as well. Even this, Mackenzie's not the quickest fullback in the world. He makes up for being physical enough, but just having a little bit more pace in that back line would probably help. Yeah, if we are to lose Meowski, like I said, I don't know whether Sockler's the answer. Again, I think you're probably going to want to look for that replacement elsewhere. Again, whether we do the same sort of thing and maybe look at a less scouted league, such as the Hungarian league, to bring in someone that we can, mould into being a top level striker for us would be ideal.
Yeah, of course, Kaiser kind of picking up on that point by the Balkan region and working out well for us. I guess natural links are going to be drawn to the Scandinavian leagues with, of course, Jimmy coming from Sweden. I'm sure there's a lot of talented players. Ibrahim Sadiq, I know, is a player that you picked up on the fact that he was watching and supporting Vinay Bazawin at the weekend. I'm sure none of us would be opposed to that signing as a winger. But that's going to be something I'll be interested to see. The likes of Vitamin T, of course, who does a lot of analysis on players and kind of puts up a sort of wish list or players that he thinks that the Dons should be targeting. Interesting to see who he maybe can identify from the Swedish league. I've certainly heard a couple of names rumoured and from there, and certainly wingers is probably something we need with the style that Thelin going to be looking to implement.
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking to play low possession, fast counter football, you need to have speed up top, but you need to have clinical players as well. Like so, we've spoken about Selwyn's sort of newfound form in front of goal. That's the sort of players you want on the wing. Sadiq, like I said, I feel like that's probably wishful thinking from me. But his ability to find the net as well in that sort of style of team would go perfectly. I know that Vitamin T had done a bit about is it KV Usted in Belgium that have come into some financial trouble and are basically having to release their entire team. There seemed like there was a few good players in there, and again, if we can get them on a free, that works pretty well for us. Because I think the other interesting point will be budget. What sort of budget will Jimmy be looking to get, and also how big of a role will the new head of recruitment be playing? Obviously, his big coup for Coventry was Gyökeres, who's now flying with Sporting Lisbon and probably going to get a 70-80 million pound move to one of the big teams. I mean, he's scored pretty much, 40 odd goals in 40 games, basically a goal a game, or a goal and an assist every game. It's something crazy. So it'd be interesting to see maybe who he's got earmarked, if there's certain markets he works in.
Well, has that been announced? Because is that one you're speaking about not the one that left in January? Because the other person I was thinking of that maybe needs a sign off or a say is the technical director, because that's not been filled yet. Remember that whole audit that we did that said we would be implementing a technical director?
Yeah.
Wonder when
I mean,
that's
I
coming
thought,
in.
yeah, because I thought we got rid of the boy. Was it Miles or Miley
Yeah,
or whatever he was called? We
he
got
was the
rid of
last
him,
one I remember.
and then I think we got him. Was it Jordan Bedlam?
Was he not the one from
Bedlam?
West Ham? We seem to be going through
No,
heads
I
of.
think the Miley or Miles, whoever it was West Ham. I think the one I'm thinking of came from Coventry. I think he was
Okay.
formerly Wolves. I want to say maybe.
Okay.
But no, I think he's came in. I know he's got a track record of some good signings. Whether he's still here, God knows. Whether he was bumped out in the audit.
Here you go. Sam
There it is,
Gordon,
Chris
roving
Patton.
reporter, keeping us
There
right.
we go. Always on the case.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like you say, I think I know we spoke before about whether leaving would maybe go into that sort of technical director role. I think it'd be a bit of a waste of his talents on the coaching side of things. Even outside of us, I think he's going to carve a very successful career as a coach. So no, I think we'll probably see somebody else filling those shoes potentially. God knows who, but someone, maybe Gordon Strachan, like he did at Dundee, get the band back together.
I see someone mentioning Tonio Teklic, of course, who chose Trabzonspor over Aberdeen, or as Graham Gibbs says, serves him right for choosing Bodrum over Bodum, because he only made a handful of appearances. But we've slagged off plenty of towns over the last couple of weeks. Falkirk already getting a bashing tonight. Skoksker, I think it was you that put in the comments about a young Icelandic keeper. Yeah, it was that Jimmy had at Elfsborg, who sold to Brentford. Maybe we could look at a loan for him. I think if we're looking at a goalkeeper, we've obviously seen what happened with Danny Ward in previous. I would rather us sign a more permanent goalkeeper personally. But in speaking of players that Jimmy currently worked with, I saw somebody mention central midfielder that he currently works with, who's on loan from Bologna. Now, I know in the last episode you said you'd rather go to Bologna than Hull. Would you rather go to Aberdeen than Bologna, and see if Jimmy could persuade him to come over to Aberdeen with him as well? I'm sure Lewis Ferguson could put in a good word.
And exactly, we've got Big Manny's Pizza as well, so it's home away from home. But no, yeah, I mean, would I swap it? Probably not, but you never know. It's
I mean, you've swapped Aberdeen for Edinburgh, so your opinions are valid.
Exactly. I'm not the spokesperson, but as well, I'm not a professional footballer. I don't get the luxury to have the quality of, because they could have a great quality of life wherever they live. Really, let's be honest. So yeah, no. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, with the position Bologna's in, if he's got a look in at the squad, probably not. Just from having European football and the sort of run they've been on. But weirder things have happened. I didn't think we were going to get Clarkson back on a permanent from Liverpool, and we did.
True.
So and again, I guess it comes down to financials. How much money is Cormac willing to throw? How much money are we going to get in from transfers as well? So
it's certainly the exciting time of the year when players get linked and players leave. We're obviously, as Aberdeen fans, I don't know if expecting's the right word in regards to Bojan Meowski, but one person who I'm probably going to have to applaud if he is still here when the transfer window comes to a close is Skoksker, who's saying that Bojan Miowski is going nowhere unless it's stupid money because he's still got 2 years on his contract. Is there any part of you optimistic that Bojan will still be here come the start of the Premiership season?
Not really. I think Cormac's too switched on. I think he's been in this position before, like I can see with Barron, where, not that I think Bojan would do the same, but, there's the potential where he gets down to that last year in his contract and he just runs it down. And then we lose so much money. The same thing was looking like it was going to happen with Lewis Ferguson, but it was going to be a case that he ran down his contract and we would have got nothing, none of the perks you would have got from going to Bologna. So I think 2 years is kind of the sweet spot. So I think 2 years is really the sweet spot for selling somebody. It gives you still the sort of stronger hand in terms of negotiation, but gives you that sort of buffer as well.
Yeah, and obviously Dave Murray saying that in his interview that he did at Greyhope with the club, he said that he's had a contract, he likes it here, but he's not going to sit here and say he would rather be in Bologna than Aberdeen. But of course, just going by this episode, look, we're not saying he's linked with Bologna before some journalist says that we've linked him to Bologna in tomorrow's newspapers. Skolksker backing up his point about saying that another season of getting over 20 goals, the clubs will be banging down the door for him. Even if he was here till January next season, I'd bite your hand off for that right now. But if he was to go in the summer, what price do you expect him to go for? Kaiser saying nothing less than 10 million. That's got to be the starting bids, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. 10 million has got to be the starting point, but I think we're still in that sort of horrible era of where anything outside of Celtic and Rangers, clubs just refuse to pay the right money. I mean, God, I mean, even look at John McGinn going from Hibs. The sort of offer Celtic put in for him was just rubbish. And the same thing happens to Aberdeen. Same thing would probably happen to Hearts. Shanklin had a few years left in his contract.
Yeah.
Somebody from down south would say, "Here's £2 million. We're not moving any further." And it's just, it's really pathetic, really. That's the mindset of a lot of clubs looking in on the Scottish League. I thought we did really well to get the deal we did for Ramsey. So maybe that's sort of a turning point in us being able to get the sort of value for our players. I think the club will probably accept something, 8 million mark. But again, it depends how hardball Cormac's wanting to play. Like I say, I think 10 million starting would be probably where he's at.
I think, as Scotia points out, remember we got 2.5 million for Sam Cosgrove. I think 10 million's got to be the benchmark because, as the Musical Box rightly points out, a striker who scored that number of goals for England sells for 20 million, probably minimum down there, the Musical Box. It was probably about triple that. And I think, the more we keep Meowski, the more his value goes up, especially if he continues to score. And Sam Gordon making a good point about saying, Bojan and his agent aren't making any noise about leaving. There was the one story about Feyenoord and that's it. We haven't heard loads of clubs linked. We've heard more clubs linked with Connor Barron than we have Bojan Miowski. I think it's just the kind of feeling amongst the support that it's expected to leave. I don't think we're naturally selling him here on the podcast. It's just trying to maybe deal with the what is likely to come. On that technical director role, Nick Harper in the comments saying Greg Broughton just left Blackburn Rovers as technical director, who were operating a similar model as Aberdeen. Would he be worth an approach? Perhaps. Maybe he's left because he's already been approached. Certainly one to watch. Again, I'm sure there's journalists watching this quickly typing them up, and we'll see that story in the papers over the next coming days as well. So yeah, interesting to see kind of what happens over the next few weeks. But I don't really feel Phil will see kind of any transfer talk until Jimmy Thelin comes in at the beginning of June.
Yeah, no, I think obviously he wants to come in and assess, a baseline. It's all fine and well you and me saying we're wanting this, that, and the next player signed until he gets on the training ground and sees where the gaps are for his style and sort of what he's wanting out of his players. We're no doubt going to be miles off with where we think the issues lie in that team. So no, I think it'll be really interesting. Like I say, I think the sort of going down this different route, appointing a manager that's not your run of the mill Neil Lennon, who somehow ended up in Romania. Your Neil Lennons, Jack Rosses, Derek Adams, that sort of run of the mill jobs for the boys type. I think that's obviously an exciting factor because it's the unknown. This could be our split the top two moment. It could be a tank and finish bottom. We could go and sign all these world beaters for pennies from the Scandinavian League. Or we could go and sign a bunch of dud fishermen from Iceland. It's, I think it's just the unknown nature that kind of makes it quite exciting, because it's not really anything we'll have seen for a while.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure when Callum comes back on the podcast, he'll be getting all giddy about the transfer news. But there is some signing news, of course, that we can announce on this podcast. Folk are going to be getting themselves well excited. But the exciting news from myself and Callum's point of view is the permanent signing to the podcast. The 6-month loan has been extended into a permanent deal, and Phil will be joining the podcast on a permanent basis from next season and going forward as well. So delighted to get pen on paper, and we'll get the scarf above the head photo sorted to make it properly official.
Yes, no, it's not official till the scarf above the head, but no, quite really excited, really excited. I think it'll be fun going into next year.
Yeah, delighted to have you signed up permanently, especially when Callum isn't always reliable to join the podcast, and makes it a lot easier to organise shows going forward. So looking forward to that. And yes, it was an undisclosed fee on there. No lasagna pies
roving reporter that's got his inside sources.
Yeah, no lasagna pies were sent to Edinburgh to secure the deal. But that is it for this show and this season. So thank you very much to everyone that's tuned in. If you are watching on YouTube, as a way to support the show, we have opened up a membership scheme. Those that tune into Ali Begg's show will be familiar with this. On the homepage of the YouTube channel, you'll be able to see the join button. It's $1.99 a month, so a very small price to pay to support what we do here, help us with the running costs for doing stuff like these live episodes. And any members will get exclusive access, early access, I should say, to any future pre-recorded episodes, including what we hope to have over the summer, a couple of interviews with members of the Aberdeen backroom staff. So you'll get early access to that. If you are an audio listener or don't want to sign up to a membership, you can, of course, support the podcast through our Ko-fi link, and that is in the description on the podcast on YouTube down below, or on audio in the description. I've also posted the link in the live chat as well for those watching tonight as well. We really appreciate any support that you show to the podcast. It doesn't have to be financially, of course. Whether you just like these videos, whether you leave us a review on audio, or share our podcast, whether that be on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, with your friends, it really helps us, and it's great to see loads of Don's content out there that fans can enjoy, and obviously of different opinions as well. It's not been the best of seasons, but there's still been loads of you out there supporting and sticking with the podcasts, whether it be ourselves or the other ones that are available as well. So thank you on that point, and let's hope that the summer brings us loads of excitement as well. As I said, we'll be back with a show at the beginning of June, looking back at the League Cup draw, and also the start of the Jimmy Thelin era as well. So Phil, thank you very much for joining me for the last few months as well.
Yeah, no, it's been fun. Like I say, I've enjoyed sort of giving my probably at times drivel opinion, both in audio, visual, and on Twitter. So it's been quite nice to annoy people in 3 formats. But no, it's been good fun. Like I say, I think hopefully next season will be a lot more positives to talk about. Yeah, just excited to sort of be on more regular and see what happens.
Exactly, and as Kaiser says, come on Scotland for the summer, an exciting summer.
RTG live from Germany, Glenn.
Don't tempt me after a few steins in Cologne. But yeah, exciting summer, not just for Scotland, but for Aberdeen as well. And we'll keep up the content over the summer. So enjoy whatever you're doing this summer, and we'll see you very soon.